Welcome to MidLIFE Matters, where we celebrate women's wisdom and wit. I'm Georgian Lussier, your host, and I'm delighted to introduce today's guest, Marge Snyder, who uses expressive puppetry as a therapy, especially with elders. Welcome, Marge.
Thank you so much, Georgiana. I'm delighted to be here.
Well, we're all going to learn a lot today about an unusual topic, because many people think puppets are only for children.
You're exactly right. And when I created this program for one of the largest hospices in our state, it was an uphill battle because that was the belief of many people. I created a program of helping people with dementia and depression find their voice and tell their story. With puppet in hand and other modalities such as music, I became a Reiki practitioner. Poetry. My goal was to reach beyond the barriers of dementia and depression. And so yes, puppets of course help children in so many ways, but I was focused on helping people with dementia who cannot prosper from cognitive therapy, as children often cannot. And cognitive therapy means therapy that uses the word, the spoken word, so that you're sitting with a therapist or you might be in a group, but that you are using the words to help you heal and come to some kind of resolution of your pain. But people with dementia cannot do that, and so there are different modalities that we can use, and I created a program for one of the largest hospices in our state and traveled the state, visiting people either in their homes or in their nursing homes, and helping them find some inner peace with puppet in hand.
And how do the puppets help you connect?
Well, they can often relate more easily and readily to a puppet because they're non-threatening. They provide unconditional love. They're actually an animation of my spirit. And often, if they have no affect, they can still begin to make connection with the puppet, and that will segue into a connection with me. I can give you an example.
Sure.
There was Grace, who was a woman in her 80s. All I was told about her from my team was that she had no voice. She did not speak for about a year. And the team was not able to make connection, and they asked if I'd go in. And what I would do is I'd pick up, I came in with all of my dog puppets because what I was told is that she had loved dogs. And I would just have the dog just sort of nestle into her neck and give her a lot of love, and I would talk about the dog, maybe about the sheepdog, or I brought in all kinds of species of dogs to see if I could tap into her memory. And at first, for the first week or so, there was no connection at all. She had no affect. She did not look at the puppets at all, but I returned because there was no apprehension. I sensed no angst. As I was loving her one day and the puppet was just licking her and loving her, I said to her, "You know, Grace, this dog just loves you." And she said, "Well, you've got to be good to it, you know." And it just broke through the barrier. Her communication was not totally fluid, but I would pick up words that allowed us to communicate. Her eyes went eventually to the puppets and in time to me, like I mentioned, and I would take her hand and give her the sensory stimulation so she would have the touch. We were communicating. So her isolation was broken and connection was made. So that's one way that puppets can be used.
You emphasize the importance of honoring people's emotions as being very essential, obviously, in the therapy. How about the idea of laughter in terms of helping us be hopeful, less afraid?
Absolutely. I think when we can laugh, Georgiana, we definitely get a sense of hope. I can give you an example of a mother and daughter in the nursing home, and when I brought in various puppets and brought in music as well, the daughter was so encouraged because she saw her mother laugh and find some joy. She said, I hadn't seen my mom laugh for so long that it gave the daughter a sense of hope that her mom will close circle of life with some kind of inner peace. And the mom told me that she felt such hope because she hadn't seen her daughter laugh for so long that she felt, okay, I believe now that my daughter will be okay. Another example is about Dr. Kwan. He was an anesthesiologist, and he told me this story where he was working with a 3-year-old little girl who was having a tonsillectomy, and she was very scared. And so he brought out his puppet. Just use your imagination. I have various outfits for these puppets, and he was dressed in the scrub of a doctor with the mask and all. And he said to the little girl how this is Doc, and he has long, loving arms, and he gives wonderful hugs, and he's lots of fun. And he did just that. He took the puppet and he put it around the little girl, and once the little girl had Doc around her neck, the crying stopped. He was able to go forward with the procedure, and total calm. And in another instance he shared, there was a 68-year-old woman who was going to have cataract cataract operation, and he said that the admitting nurse, he learned from her that this woman had tremendous angst, was very, very nervous about the operation. And so he again approached her with Doc in hand. And, I think what happened in that scenario is that she had asked him, where's Doc? She had known that he had this bit. And he said, he's on vacation, but I'm going to see if I can call him in. And he went to his office, brought Doc out, and it did that little bit of magic for this woman where it calmed. And the laughter that she was able to express, it broke the intensity of the angst. And when we laugh, we're all one, we're all connected. So it's a very powerful tool in helping us to heal through the pain that we're going through. And puppets are one very powerful therapeutic tool in helping increase laughter.
And you've written a book where you guide therapists in many aspects of using puppets. It's a very generous book. I read it and enjoyed it in terms of really making a contribution to the field in a big way. And can you give some examples of how specific puppets might be most appropriate in certain situations?
Sure.
When there's, say, fear, anger, confusion.
Yes. I can tell you about, because I did not only work with people with dementia and depression, I created a program for PDPAL, for children and their families. And I can tell you about Caliph, who was 15, dying of MS. And the social worker was not getting through to him at all. And so she said to Caliph, and I am changing names, Georgiana, but so she said, I'd like to bring Marge in with her puppets. And as you might understand, puppets and teenagers are not always in sync. It's not quite cool for a teenager. They have to really trust you to open up with a puppet. So he kept saying no, he didn't want me to come in. But she kept insisting. And so finally, I think to get her just off of his back, he said, okay. And she said, look, if you don't want Marge to return, just one visit. So I came in. And I always start with the dogs and the cats because it's typically what people can very readily relate to. Often they've had them as pets. So that's what I did. And he grew very fond of Licorice. who was our little black lab puppy. But I brought in other dogs, and we would talk about different stories of the different species of dog. And at the end of the session, I asked if I could come back, and he was more than willing. During the weeks that occurred after, he wanted more and more wild animals to come in, and he watched a lot of TV. He was not able to get to school, and he had a lot of information, and we would talk about these wild animals. And then he began telling me about the pit bull that his father owned, and at that point I said to him, you know, I'm more afraid of I said, I am really afraid of pit bulls. And he said, you know, Marge, I'm more afraid of pit bulls than I am of dying. And I think my expressing my vulnerability permitted him to share his. And he began to talk about how angry he was, the injustice he felt of dying at 15. He said not being able to go to college and not having sex with a girl in his life. And all of that began to unfold as he talked about the fear of that pit bull dog. And then I was able to bring the social worker back in. He still wanted me to return with the puppets. He always returned to the love that he felt for Licorice, but it allowed him to open up to his fear. I can give you another example, if I may. I was working with Catherine, who had no dementia, but she had severe depression. She was sleeping all of the time, and they wanted to see if I can establish a connection so that she would at least sleep less. So I went in. I did not know much about her at all, except that she had been a hairdresser. I went in with all kinds of puppets and literally was not making much headway. No affect at all, but she was sleeping less. She would watch the puppets, and I brought out dogs, and I brought out cats, and I brought out rabbits, and I sang songs. Nothing was touching her, but I kept coming back because she was sleeping less, looking at me with no affect, until I brought out this puppet. And what I did was I used the puppets as metaphors, and what I did is simply to just mirror what I saw. I saw a person totally retracted into their shell, and then I just brought the turtle out of its shell. And as I did that, that woman smiled from ear to ear, and she looked so beautiful. She looked like she lost 10 years of her life. I mean, she became so much younger looking and truly beautiful that I began to just cry. And I went over to her and just took a leap of faith. I figured I could ask her. She need not respond, but maybe she will. And all I said was, Catherine, why are you so sad? She looked at me, penetrated with her eyes. I felt it deep within my soul. Just kept looking and looking until I think what she was, feeling was, do I trust her? Do I share something so intimate? And it was a blessing when, yes, she opened and said, I'm not ready to die. I don't want to die. I'm not ready to leave my family. And I said, Catherine, the very thing that you're not ready to do is what you're bringing on. The thing that you want is connection with your family, but you're not connecting with them. You're sleeping all the time. So they're coming less because it's like there's no connection to be made. And I left that day hoping that when I returned, there'd be some more glimmer of life, and there was. Eventually, Catherine came off of hospice and lived in the nursing home for about a year or more. But it's this turtle that just broke through. So that's just another way that I use them as metaphors for what I see in behavior.
Let's talk about how you came to the point of being an expressive therapist using puppetry. So you taught elementary school.
Yes, I did.
And you raised two wonderful young men.
Mm-hmm.
And then now you've done this puppetry for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
So, wow, that's a wonderful journey.
Yes, it has been.
And there's a story about how chocolates led to puppets and your puppet petting zoo, okay? And then you've got some other training as well. So let's start with the chocolate story.
Okay, so I began making chocolate, and I created all kinds of teddy bear chocolates. And my husband and I and our sons were young at the time, and we'd go into just different kinds of chocolate fairs. But then I began to create mainly just teddy bear chocolates, where maybe panda bears all in chocolate, carrying chocolate balloons and all kinds of chocolate lollipops. And my husband and I love going to the bear shows around the country. And but under the guise of quality control, I was consuming way too much chocolate, and I was getting hypoglycemic, and I had to stop. And so I said to my husband, let's go to the Javits Center and see if I can incorporate some other bear into because we wanted to do the bear shows. We loved doing them. Adults were so in touch with the child within them, and there was so much whimsy and so much magic. So we went to the Javits Center, and I don't know if you've ever been, but it's gigundous.
Massive. Yeah.
Massive is the word. And we were getting very tired, just aisle after aisle. And just perchance, we came upon a puppet booth. And we went in, and we started playing with all these puppets. And when we left, I mean, all the laughter, we realized, my gosh, we're not even tired now. We went home with this bear, which we just loved. And he came in a dark brown and a honey and in different sizes. And we took them to the bear show with my chocolates. And either my husband David or I were standing by the booth animating him, and people were loving them. And we had some that they could take home. And then a woman came up to us and said, oh, it's just such a beautiful bear. I think my residents in the nursing home would love if you would come. Would you do that? It's something that I never even envisioned. But we went, and that was the start of something that, it was just an incredible journey over 2 decades now. We developed one of the largest collections of puppets in the country, and we created a puppet petting zoo in our barn. That housed, it was all different habitats, and it was a resource center for hands-on educational play, storytelling, and puppet therapy. One thing led to another. We started traveling the country to all kinds of professional conferences, putting puppets in hand, and I began working with child and adolescent psychiatrists and social workers, who kept asking me, can I share my story? And that led to sentences on napkins until it got transferred eventually to a book of A Hand in Healing, The Power of Expressive Puppetry.
And then you studied some other modalities, right?
Yes.
You mentioned at the beginning that, you've done Reiki and you have different things you can offer. So what training and practices did you pursue that you felt helped round out your ability to really use your natural skills and gifts to the best, as well as incorporate puppets?
Well, I got trained in spiritual counseling, and so that was a 6-month training, and with a social worker and a religious leader. And then they only picked a small handful of people. I was blessed to be one. But part of that contract was that I would then take a client in hand for at least a year under their supervision, and I took a wonderful couple. They were Holocaust survivors that I worked with for 2 years under their supervision. So that was one thing. I then studied Reiki, and I'm a Reiki 2 practitioner. And then along my path at one wellness, I think it was a wellness conference, there was a man playing Native American flute, and the sound was so soulful, and I got myself 2 flutes actually, and I incorporated that. And then music was a big part too. I didn't get trained in music, but it wasn't training, but what I had to learn was all kinds of songs. Because as you might know, what taps into a person's memory is from their roots. And so I learned a lot of Christian hymns. I learned a lot of Yiddish and Hebrew songs. There was one particular client that only wanted Irish songs. I learned them. So there was one particular African-American woman who wanted her gospel music. So I wasn't exactly trained, but it was a lot of learning for me to learn all these songs and share. And it's incredible, even people with dementia. I think that's pretty known by now, that even people with dementia, you can tap into their memory absolutely beautifully through music. They often would teach me, with severe dementia, teach me songs that they knew from their roots. The other thing that I did with my clients, but I didn't study for it, was poetry. And I was quite amazed myself that people with severe dementia, if I talk to the senses, what does it feel like, taste like, smell like there was one golden retriever dog, this one particular client of mine, it so resonated for her. The minute she saw that dog, she thought it was Max. And I didn't even have to be, I was there with her, but I didn't have to be. She was so contented holding Max in her hand. And we wrote a beautiful poem that was a legacy. She wrote the poem, I mean, but I transcribed it, that she was then we were able to share with her family. It was a legacy that she left. So I brought a lot of modalities, but the prime tool that I used was a puppet.
And you've spoken to groups and shared your experiences and stories.
Yes.
Right?
We traveled, my husband and I traveled to maybe 35 or more conferences in a year around the country and into Canada. And groups of all kinds have asked me to speak. Because my basic message is you don't have to use a puppet particularly, but I train staff in how to really intimately connect with the person at hand and how to really empty of any agenda and have no judgments or expectations at all, no biases, and to listen, to really listen. Because if we have no one to listen to us and to share our story to, was our life worth living? I mean, everybody has that right, and there's no segment of the population that can be discarded. And sometimes people with dementia, even family members, think, you know, I don't have to visit much. They're vacant now, and it doesn't matter. But that's not true. Their emotions are totally appropriate to the very last moment of breath. And connection and love is something that resonates for everyone, whether they have severe dementia or severe depression. Love and connection is something that every human being, it's not a privilege, it's a right that we all need to have.
That's beautiful. So looking back at your life, I always ask women, what advice would you give yourself? Say 25, 40.
Yeah. I think at any age I'd give myself the same. That trust in yourself, attempt to be deeply grounded and authentic, and follow your passion. Build on love, and don't ever let fear be an obstacle. A lot of people, you know, even when I did this, created this expressive puppetry program for the state, there were a lot of people who, you know, puppets, like you said, it's for children. They couldn't wrap around it. They couldn't understand the intensity and immensity of impact that they could have. But I knew, you know, I knew what it was doing. So, yeah, I think to my 25-year-old self, to my 40-year-old self, to my 70-year-old self, it's always for me the same. Do what you love and keep moving, keep doing it. And it builds. It somehow has a way of building and becoming, it has the potential of building and becoming something absolutely wonderful. That's sacred. I mean, the people I met, the love that was developed between us was deeply sacred.
And your favorite quote?
I have so many, but the one I'll
you
share...
You have more than one.
Okay, I think the one I'll share today is, without change, there would be no butterflies. I like to feel that I, or those I love, or those that I connect with, if I can encourage them not to get stuck in fear, and to keep the faith. If you love it, it's good, and keep doing it.
Thank you so much for sharing all of this. I'm sure we've all learned a lot, and hopefully many of us will see things more broadly, more openly as a result, and particularly with people in our families and our loved ones who we may be thinking we can't reach them.
That's right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And please tune in to hear other fascinating women on future segments of MidLIFE Matters TV. I'm Georgian Lussier, your host. Thanks for watching.